Hey, my pod people. We are going to jump into a conversation today about hormones and the Ayurvedic perspective on hormones. I just published a book, Ayurveda for Women's Health, and I am really excited to share with you a way of looking at your hormones that is incredibly simple and incredibly useful in helping you find that state of balance that you're looking for in your hormones. Don't go anywhere because after this, I'm going to download the info. It seems like everywhere I go right now, I'm hearing a lot of women talking about hormone balance. And I don't know that anyone knows what that means, right? So it seems to me that we're having a problem being sold to us at this time, which is that our hormones are out of balance. And that's the reason that we feel X, Y, or Z. Meanwhile, the conversation or the explanation about hormones, it seems to flummox us and not really make a lot of sense a lot of the time. So what I'm wary of is that this problem of hormone balance is being sold to us, and the answer is the next thing that will be sold, and it's probably going to look like a pharmaceutical. So I definitely have a fire under my ass about this conversation, and I'd really like to get some alternate viewpoints out there. And Ayurveda is such a great place to look for a holistic perspective on women's health. So today, let's start with how does Ayurveda look at hormones? How can we use the language of Ayurveda to understand what we call hormones? So firstly, Ayurveda doesn't talk about hormones because hormones weren't known, measured, or called as such until the early 1900s, and Ayurveda is thousands of years old. So what we can do, however, is take the language of Ayurveda and use it to describe what we now know of and call as hormones. So a lot of what I am sharing with you today started with the work of one of my teachers, Dr. Claudia Welch. She's fantastic. I will surely have her on the podcast one day and we'll hear it from the horse's mouth. She is a doctor of Chinese medicine as well as Ayurveda. And there is where she found I'll say the model in which she has created a way of looking at hormones that is so smart. It makes so much sense. So essentially, when we talk about balance, let's look at two buckets, right? Let's look at sort of two places where we have different kinds of hormones. So we're going to talk about sex hormones and stress hormones today. And sex hormones will mainly talk about estrogen and progesterone. And those are the hormones in women that are responsible for ovulation and menstruation. So estrogen is that one that tells the body to build the endometrial lining. It also provides the building blocks for the genetic component of the egg. And estrogen is, up until menopause, emitted from the ovaries. And progesterone is another sex hormone that comes in about halfway through the cycle, through the menstrual cycle. So the first 2 weeks are dominated by estrogen and the activity of ovulation, while the second 2 weeks of the cycle are dominated more by progesterone, which comes in to check estrogen or tell estrogen to stop building the lining. Therefore, the lining can mature and then be sloughed off or got rid of by the body. And then the cycle will start again after the menstrual period. So estrogen is a very cool, soft, moist energy. It has those qualities in the body, similar to if we were to think of other things that are cool, moist, and soft. That has me thinking about milk, right? Maybe some yogurt swimming in a cool body of water. So these qualities of cool and moist and soft. Imagine how that makes your skin feel and your connective tissues, your joints, right? So everything is nice. It's not inflamed, it's not hot, right? It's cool. It's plenty of moisture and lubrication, and it is soft and smooth, right? So estrogen is a big player in creating the voluptuousness of skin, hair, eyes, etc. And during the first 2 weeks of the cycle, we might feel more of that, those who are in the menstruating years of life. And the progesterone is a little bit hotter. It's going to calm down the coolness and the moisture that comes from estrogen. Because imagine if you had too much of that, right? It would be, you'd be like the blueberry girl in Willy Wonka, right? So there has to be a system of checks and balances, even within these two sex hormones and how they relate to each other in order to create a menstrual cycle, the first 2 weeks and the second 2 weeks. And essentially, sex hormones in the body are responsible for the activities of fertility. And that is a all around building kind of an energy, cool, soft, and moist. And the opposition on the other side of the balance here, the opposition to the qualities of the sex hormones are stress hormones. And stress hormones are responsible for not fertility, but survival. So we can talk about adrenaline and cortisol, probably things you've heard of. Adrenaline is a stress hormone that is secreted by the adrenal glands, and it's for, we could say, a shorter term stressor. So when you drink coffee and you get kind of high and you get a lot of action and active feelings, that is the adrenaline. And it's usually processed by the body. It's like out of your body within a day, right? So it might make you feel a little hot. I know I sweat when I drink too much caffeine, and it'll definitely give you that active energy. Cortisol is a hormone that is designed for longer term stressors. So unlike adrenaline, which is processed out of the body rather quickly, cortisol can stay in the bloodstream for a week or more and takes that long to be processed out of the bloodstream when we are no longer in that stress situation. So the thing about these stress hormones that we're seeing is perhaps that the body gets caught in a cycle of secreting stress hormones too often, and especially cortisol. Cortisol is something that we're not meant to be giving the long-term stressor to the body often. That's something that might happen, say, seasonally. If you think in ancient times, during a season where there's less food or there's a tribal migration, for example. That's the kind of thing where the body might pump out some cortisol for a while. And cortisol sort of redirects resources in the body definitely sends energy towards the arms and legs, which is helpful when you have to be on the move. And away from, however, the middle channels of the body, that's where our reproductive organs are, and that's where our digestive organs are. So it can be problematic if over and over again we're secreting cortisol and the body's sending energy sort of away from the core activities and to the extremities for movement. And cortisol, like adrenaline, is also hot and active. So one might start to feel excessively hot and active. And where you might notice that activity more than your arms and legs is in the mind. So something that I would say we're seeing. I have been observing women's bodies for decades, both as a yoga teacher and an Ayurvedic practitioner. And I think it's safe to say that people in general are under higher levels of stress, or maybe longer term levels of stress. Imagine that feeling when your phone rings and you kind of jump, or you start sweating when you go to check your email. These are examples of sort of a heightened stress response. So you have to imagine, with these two buckets of stress hormones and sex hormones, they exist in a balance with each other. So if one side goes up, the other side goes down, and vice versa. And the balance between these two kinds of hormones, one being hot and active, and the other one being cool and soft, one being drying, the other one being moist, right? You can see how we need to keep these energies in balance in the body, these qualities in balance in the body in order to feel good, or else things will start to get too hot and dry. And that is more of what we're seeing with the hormones. So just to add into the mix for those listening who are in perimenopause or moving towards menopause, very specific things are also happening at that time. So from the time of age 35 is when we start to see estrogen production naturally decline in the body, just probably a smaller amount that we'll start to see in, say, the mid to late 40s. And as women approach menopause, we're just going to have less and less estrogen until the ovaries stop producing estrogen altogether and there's no longer ovulation. And then soon enough after that, there will be no longer a menstrual cycle. And this is a natural thing. It's not a pathology and it's not a problem. It is the natural redistribution of energy and resources as the body gets older. The body will naturally, rather than focus on creating more bodies to feed and take care of, will focus more on this body and also on the bodies that already exist and caring for and mentoring those humans. So as we see the estrogen decline and also the progesterone, the sex hormones in general, decline as women get closer to the menopause time of life, the sex hormones then have the stress hormones, I should say, have less of a buffer. So what happens is when we have those hot, dry, active qualities coming from adrenaline and cortisol, those are balanced by higher levels of estrogen and progesterone when we're younger. But as we get older and we see a natural and normal slow decline in the sex hormones as we age, it is likely that our resiliency to stress and to the hot and the dry active qualities of the stress hormones is less. So you might feel in this stage of life as though that which was not a problem for you previously, like you could drink 2 glasses of wine a night without waking up sweating, or you could work this job and take on all the projects and do all the things without feeling like it was too much. And then at some point it starts to shift and feel like it's too much. It's too much wine. It's too much work. And that makes sense. The thing about this lens for viewing hormone changes is that it starts to make sense why we might feel a little less resilient towards stressors as we get older. And the answer to this problem is for sure taking a look at our stress, right? At our stress situation. One of the things we want to watch out for, and this is something I do see in my practice, is women experiencing this imbalance too early, let's say. So they're not in perimenopause, they're in their late 30s, for example, and are starting to feel like the body is too hot and too dry. So that causes things like hot flashes, and it's not fun. It can also contribute to fertility challenges, menstrual changes that are uncomfortable, painful periods, intervals becoming too short or too long. So each person has their normal, right? But it's when you start to see changes that feel like they're too early. If a body there's only so much food on the plate, and is that food going to go towards, are those resources going to go towards the stress hormones or the sex hormones? When posited the question of fertility versus security or survival, a body will always choose security and survival over fertility. So the stress hormones are going to win the resources every time. And some of the hormones in the sex bucket are shapeshifters and can very easily move over and be used as resources for the production of stress hormones. And that is a problem that is causing imbalances for women. And I think we're going to notice it more after the age of 35. And it's this same kind of a situation that can also lead towards difficult symptoms in perimenopause and menopause. So one of the things that I like about this perspective is it's simple, right? We sort of are like, okay, there's the cool, soft, and moist aspects of my body. And there are the sort of slow, receptive, inward moments in my days. There's times of rest, right? And potential quietude. And on the other side, balancing that are the hot, the dry, and the light qualities, the activity instead of rest. So there's productivity and work and play and getting out and about and putting yourself out there and all those kinds of things. And we want these two to exist in a state of balance. So Ayurveda would say to create a balance in your hormones, create a balance in your energies, your daily life, your energies. So the way that I've been talking and writing about these energies that need to be balanced, I've been using the word solar and lunar, which comes to us from the yoga technology. The major two passages of energy in the body are that of the sun and that of the moon. And that's what Hatha yoga means, is it's a balance of sun and moon energy. And solar energy is that which is hot and active. Lunar energy is that which is cool and receptive or soft. So, for example, if a person was inflamed or overheated, Ayurveda texts would recommend walks in the moonlight or moon bathing. And those who are cold might be recommended to increase the heat by sunbathing, right? So these two energies, they have their qualities. So there's the hot and dry side, and there's the cool and moist side. So we do need to buffer stress, periods of stress in our life, with more cool and moist qualities, as well as potentially more rest, more slow inward attention time. This is where I do see a rub. I think culturally we live in a very solar leaning environment, and especially for women who are dealing with these very big marked shifts at a certain time of life in the sex hormones and the stress hormones and that relationship, that it can be even more necessary to include more of the qualities that estrogen and progesterone bring to the body, more of that cool and moist and soft. And when we live in a world where productivity and activity are that which is predominant, it's a countercultural movement to increase the lunar qualities in the system. Ways that we might do that certainly involve choosing quiet over talking, not all the time, but when we feel like we need it. Choosing rest over activity and work. So, for example, somebody who works out vigorously 5 days a week might, in the middle there, add 1 day of something quieter, like a restorative kind of activity, swimming, or a restorative yoga class, yin class, something like that, where there's less jumping around, less moving, and less heat created, and more of a soft and sort of slow energy to it. So a person might go from working out vigorously 5 days a week to 4 days a week, and then integrating 1 or 2 days of a more lunar activity. We can also increase the lunar energies simply with how we approach our days, right? By working rest and quiet periods into the month, into the week, and even into each day, we are ensured that we're going to remain in a state of balance. And it's important that we do this because we do live in a culture where everything is moving all the time. And it's not only the body, but also the mind that is moving. We can increase the cool, moist, and soft qualities through food as well. Examples of things that are cool and soft do include milks, and that can be a cow milk, that can also be a coconut milk or an almond milk. And those things are going to sort of soften the hot and the dry qualities. We want to make sure we're getting good fats. Ayurveda speaks very highly, most highly of ghee as the fat to use for bolstering the tissues. We can also apply oil to the skin on a regular basis. And the application of oil to the skin, instead of, say, a conventional lotion, is going to create a literal physical buffer against stress, and you will feel the difference when you practice oil massage. So it's an application of oil to the skin before the shower. The hot water then kind of softens the surface of the skin, allows the oil to penetrate deeper. Just soap the hairy parts, towel dry after, and off you go. And you can certainly find more information about oil massage and the deep dive into oil massage in any of my books or also on my blog. So what I'm seeing in women's health is there's really three threads where which we have agency and influence in our health narrative. There's that which we put in our bodies, right? Our foods. They can be hot and dry, they can be cool and moist, or they can be a nice balance of the two. And I find that when I'm talking about what we put in our bodies, I don't only mean herbs, spices, and foods. I also mean what we put into our mental field. And that's important in the stress conversation for sure. That our intake of media, whether it's news, social media, movies, TV shows, that we are aware of what's coming in through the senses there. And that we are not, let's say, overdoing it with how much we're digesting that's coming through the eyes and through the different forms of media that we consume. So that which we consume is affecting us for sure. And things that we consume may contain solar or lunar qualities. So the distinction I'm making in the mind here is things that cause a person to feel safe and sound and even cozy. Those kind of influences and activities are going to support the production and qualities of the sex hormones, while things that are stimulating or potentially stressful or even thrilling, right? Things that are thrillers can also kind of poke the nest of the stress hormone story. So what we put in, what we consume is really important. The second thread for women's health that I'm talking about a lot is circulation. The tendency for the generative organs in women, the tendency towards imbalance there is usually in the direction of stagnation. If you think about ovaries, uterus, vaginal canal, vulva, all those organs and their functions, it's a lot. It's a lot that bodies do: ovulation, menstruation, gestation, birth, postpartum. So much happens in a very small bit of real estate. If you think about how small the part of your body, let's say it's a little below a few inches below the navel and to the pubic bone or the pelvic floor, very small area where there is a lot of function, a lot going on, and a lot of it involves movement. So keeping energy moving in that area. So in Ayurveda, when we talk about circulation, we're not just talking about circulation of blood, while that is important here, also the circulation of prana or energy. And energy rides on the breath. Prana is brought into the body through the breath. So breathing into the belly, getting the breath into the pelvic bowl, that kind of a thing happening on a regular basis, even just a small amount, like a few breaths daily down into the pelvis, is a fantastic way to bring energy, bring the body's attention and energy to this generative system, where what you might notice without a little effort, the energy and attention often goes towards those things which stress us out, right? The stress story often is stealing the resources, it's stealing your attention. So, a general practice of breathing down and into the pelvic bowl is fantastic for assuring good circulation of this area in the body, as is taking care not to sit too scrunched up or for too long, taking walks, getting movement through this part of the body, and being aware of restrictive clothing, right? And not wearing those sorts of things all the time or too often. So just being aware of energy moving through this small bit of real estate in the body. The third thread for women's health, and potentially the most potent, is about how we do life. Because if you really zoom out and look at that which stresses you out, a lot of the time, I think we get caught in a cycle of stress where the content or the actual thing that stresses us out may not even be what we're thinking about anymore. It's just that the stress response becomes automatic and we just start stressing. And then the belief becomes that life is stressful and that I am stressed out. And there is a choice. There are moments where we can zoom out and look at our stress story and look at how we do life. Are we taking on too much? Are we saying yes to too many people or to too many things? I think that's a really common thing that women do, is we want to hold and support too much or too many. And it's completely okay to not overdo that, to not push the boundaries of one's ability to caretake for others. Like all things, there's a balance there of caring for the self, the inner self, as well as caring for others. And so, as in Ayurveda, we are always looking for a state of balance. So your take homes today, think about that breathing down into the bowl of the pelvis to increase the circulation. Think about that which you consume and its qualities. Just take note. There's no judgment here, and there's also no need to immediately take action. If you are drawn in that direction, great. But often when we start looking at the particulars of our daily lives, it's going to take a little time to introduce changes there. And when it comes to zooming out and looking at how we do stress and how we do life and what we take on, those are very big things that will absolutely take some time. And remember with Ayurveda that doing it all and doing everything perfectly is often a recipe for more stress and health problems than it is helpful. So the one small thing that you can start working with is almost always the potent thing. So if there was one thing that jumped out at you today, just take that with you on the road. Until next time, and I'll see you soon here at Everyday Ayurveda with Kate. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope this was helpful.